Well, hello and welcome inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 682. That's right, 682 from Champ to Chump. It saddens me. Hey, this is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. Tonight, I've asked you here for one simple reason.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
Exactly what I need you to do. Actually, tonight, we're going to talk about how you actually go from champ to chump. But before doing that, I have to introduce my partners in podcast criminality. You know her, you love her. It's the lovely, redoubtable
Grace!
Grace, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Tom. How are you doing?
Good, I'm doing well. Well, Grace and I are also joined. He's mad, he's crazy, he's a wild man. He has no name. Actually, he does have a name. You know him.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
It's Paul. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good. I introduced myself, evidently.
You do.
So
You
cheers,
like
everybody.
Nice.
You like
good
this?
job.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Isn't that nice?
Sounds just like me. It's
It
crazy.
does. It's crazy how that happens. I need to get like an audio recording of Grace that I could, introducing herself and then.
As the International, I don't think it really.
This is Paul Charsley, the
Oh
international.
no, she's been to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, Paul. That's pretty international.
That is international. You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Never been there. Probably won't go. But so I'm
Yeah.
glad Grace pulled it.
Grace.
I think you enjoyed it though, didn't you, Grace?
She
I
did.
did.
Here,
I
let me
also have
speak
people
for
that live
Grace.
there, so
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
we did like the tourist thing and checked it out, and
Did you
What is
ride
there
the
to see in
Ferrari
Abu
roller
Dhabi?
coaster?
No, we did not go to Ferrari World. There's not
okay.
time for that. I really
There's
would have gone to
always
the
time
giant
for Ferrari
IKEA.
World.
No, there's not. In my McLaren regalia, right? Like I've just been given the middles as I went down the camera, right? Like
They
over the
put
big
you on the
hill.
rickety one. You
In
know.
my world, there's always time for Ferraris.
There's never time. Never time.
Yeah. Oh no, McLaren fans, you go in
Yeah.
vehicle number 7.
You would have went there,
You go in
Grace,
that line.
and you would have said,
I mean, it's always a big emotion.
"It's always a big emotion, Grace. Always."
Right.
Oh boy, we got a lot to talk about. There's been a lot going on. The last time we were together, all three of us, we were breaking news of a group or a website that broke it from another group or another website. So in essence, we were breaking news as it happened.
Yes,
Yes.
right on top of it we were.
That's how
yes.
on top of it we are. Hey, look, when you have, freelance interns like Huxley and Atticus, you take what you can get.
Yeah. Where have they been this whole time, by
I
the
don't
way?
know. I don't know. They're home.
Are they marooned somewhere?
They may be. I mean, thankfully for Flip last time, he caught it mid-show and
he
shared
did.
it with us because Lord knows Huxley didn't.
With that door behind Grace is the door of information.
Well,
So-
you never.
Breaking news. The door
Yes.
just slams open. And there's a sign saying what just happened just now.
You don't know what's going to come through.
That door opens up. Toto's going to Aston Martin. Lewis isn't going anywhere. Seb's retiring. It's like, what, Flip, what the heck? He's like the Delphic Oracle
Although, really-
behind that door.
Most likely, if the door opens, it's a cat, and you
Yeah.
just can't see them.
Right. Well, okay. I would expect that from a woman with 2 cats.
That's right. Because they're no respecter of your working.
No, they're not. No, that's not how
That's
they roll.
when they're interested the most.
So
That's why I don't have cats. I demand respect.
Dogs don't respect you either. They just
No, they
pretend.
My children take the place of not respecting me from the cats. So
There you go. You got all your bases covered, man.
that's right.
Everybody's at home going,
Get to the show.
This is the show.
We
This
got no
is the
news to
show.
cover this week. I don't know. It's just
I don't think anything happened. No.
gosh, what are people in
No.
such a hurry for?
Straight to the fashion award.
I don't know.
We're over.
I'm
Play
still-
aliens. We're out.
I'm still getting haterade email from people that are upset that I don't like sim racing, and I'm like,
Stop yelling at Todd.
I don't understand. Okay, it's just my opinion, Hey,
I think it's getting better though. I
whatever.
enjoy-
I'm watching
I-
NASCAR now. What the hell do I care? I got
That's
real
right.
racing. I watched the
Good
NASCAR
luck with that.
race. I
I
watched
would
it.
rather watch virtual MotoGP than the actual NASCAR race.
Well, see, that's how you and I differ, because I
That's
actually
fine.
watched the NASCAR race at Darlington, which you will recall, Grace, is the track too tough to tame. And
That's what it says on the sign.
who the heck am I to know? I don't know. I'll take Jeff Gordon's word for it. Whatever.
There you
So
go.
I watched it. It was Paul. Help me out here. Good to see Matt Kenseth get the ride in the last minute, because the dude that was in the car had racial slurs in a sim race, and he's gone. And so
Yes.
Matt Kenseth comes in, does top 10, which is a good result for him. He's been out of a car since 2018, so that was
and he
good.
wouldn't have had
Really?
any
Wow.
time or place to test or
No-
anything.
no
So literally,
qualifying.
you get your butt in the seat and the
Yep.
green flag drops. So
Go.
yeah, very, very impressive for the old guys. We've still got it.
Yep. And then
If only
Kevin
we get it.
Harvick
Is-
wins. It was a good win.
That's okay. Mark Martin is probably still racing in NASCAR, right?
No, Grace. Ernie Irvin and Mark
No.
Martin retired.
I don't know.
I mean, he was old 20 years ago, right? So he's probably like 90 now. He may still be in NASCAR, though.
I don't know. I think Mark could probably still out bench press me.
I'm
pretty
sure.
of it.
He's a little strong dude for sure.
He's a wiry little dude.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Crazy.
Could
All right,
definitely
let's
still
talk
be
about
fast.
Formula One. Can we do that?
All right.
Yeah, from NASCAR to Formula One, we're done.
Woo.
Is that our review of the first real race of the?
Grace didn't watch it. Boo.
Yeah.
We watched it. Yay for the old guys on to Formula One.
Well, I mean, it was kind of funny because I was watching Twitter for my two-screen experience, which is another thing I hate. So I'm watching, and it's like everybody's watching this like they're just waiting for some sort of train wreck. I mean, it was like they're having a race. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, well, it started. And blah, blah. People, what did you think was going to happen? The whole paddock was going to explode? It's a
Right.
virus. They were just
I mean, it
running
was-
a race.
Yeah, and this stuff's all going to evolve. It's interesting for me. I was watching it because obviously NASCAR own IMSA there,
Yep.
and so I'm trying to see, okay, what's my world going to look like, in 6 weeks' time?
Right,
So I thought it was
right.
interesting.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to demand to be interviewed on TV so I can see that really big long
The boom mic.
like
The boom
bump
mic.
me in the nose or something. Who's controlling that thing? It's too long. I can't get a hold of it. But so there was a
Wad it
couple of
down.
humorous points.
And Reagan's
I
having
thought the
to
big
yell.
long mic. I mean, did anyone see Kentucky Fried Movie ever?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the mic hitting the guy on the head and stuff. That's what I was envisioning going to happen. Whoever was doing it did an incredible job. But that was interesting. And then
Right.
interviewing someone when they had the face mask on. I'm not sure that's necessary. I think that's part of the aesthetics of what they had to show off. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, if someone's shouting at you from 6 foot away with the pole and the microphone, I think you're okay to take the mask off out in the open.
Yeah.
But
I
but
mean-
they kept him on, so whatever.
Yeah, he had the
But,
mic boom out there, and he's having to yell the question. So,
Right.
so how was the car? Well, I'd like to thank my sponsors. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
Did they have sponsored face masks?
No.
No,
didn't.
they had all
That's-
kinds of colorful.
You
face
would have
masks, though.
thought, right? NASCAR, they shouldn't have missed a beat, really, should they?
Really? I mean,
Next
because
time.
you can. Because I got an ad from all the sports teams, like the NBA sells. Like
Mhm.
I could buy Wizards face masks, or you could buy the Bulls or
Yeah.
whoever you wanted. So
I would do
Well,
one
I don't
that
know why.
is just a picture of my lower half of my face. So when I wear it, it looks like I'm not wearing one.
Like the Valentino Rossi helmet, right? Where it's just his
Oh,
face, right?
right.
Lando would love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you're looking
You
for.
would.
It's just your face.
So it was great that they did it, that they figured out about make it work, that it worked,
Yeah.
and no one, nothing went crazy wrong with all the dynamics of everyone being far apart and trying to put on a TV
Yeah.
show and all
No,
that
it was
kind
great.
of stuff.
They did a great job. Yeah.
So it bodes well for whatever any other racing series are going to
And
try
then-
and get going, I think.
And then I saw people. I don't know, I'm not going to name websites, but on social media, they were all, the COVID cops are out, right? And so, well, the spotters were 6 feet away. And I was like, oh my gosh, dude, come on, man. At some level, we're all adults here. We're all doing
Yeah.
this. I mean, we don't need the NASCAR, rules and all that stuff to tell us to wear water wings here. Okay.
Right.
Everybody's doing what they're doing and,
Mhm.
but I think apart from, everybody picking the fly poop out of the pepper on this thing. I think NASCAR did a great job. Staged it. Kevin Harvick, very rightfully, after he won, got out of the car and said, it's really unfortunate because it's dead silent here on the track, and we don't hear the fans.
Right.
But we hope that we put it on a good show for you, which they did. Yeah, it was a good.
Yeah,
job.
I think next time they'll change the cameras the other way so they face the pit lane so they can.
Right.
Yeah.
Although that's where everyone was hugging and committing COVID.
Right. Yeah, the COVID
Touching each other's
penalties.
faces, right? Rubbing their eyes in each other's eyes. Yeah.
All right. So
You think
that
they would
was-
have learned from China, right? Like learn how to shoot it so that you don't see the stands, right?
Hmm.
Or yeah, right.
I think they'll figure it out next time. Or maybe they did it
Oh,
on purpose just to kind of show the effects. Or whatever.
Well, that's right.
But,
We really did it, but yeah.
Yep. There's another race coming up in 2 days, so you may have
Yeah,
missed it, Grace, but
you
you
know-
can tune in on Wednesday.
That's
I
right.
thought that was crazy how tight of a schedule they're running.
Yeah.
Well,
it
I
is,
mean, it
isn't
actually makes
You got
sense.
to. I
I think-
agree.
yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. It
does.
makes sense. I'm just saying, like from a human being, that's crazy, right? Like that's a lot. But yeah, no, absolutely. You're there. You're in the biosphere. You got to get as much done in the biosphere as you can before you have to
Right.
get out of the biosphere. So
That's right.
the
That's why I think
brown
Formula
biosphere.
One should do that. I really think
Yeah.
they should. I don't think you should drag it out for 7 days and these people just sitting there,
nope, that's right.
You can do it. I think they should do it.
Okay, 15 races at Austria, done. Season over.
Good try.
Okay.
At least 2 in a row, but not a week apart. That's all I'm saying.
That is all you're saying, and there you have it. All right, let's talk about Formula One. All right, so here we go. Last
Okay.
week, you'll
There's
recall
nothing to
that
cover,
it was
whatever.
sort of breaking news when we were recording the podcast. We brought up that it was announced that Sebastian Vettel was leaving Ferrari at the end of 2020, his final season. Now, a week on from that, we've got a lot more that we have learned. We've learned who's taken his place. We've learned who's moving and what seats are. So this is sort of the domino effect, if you will, of silly season in a season that hasn't even started yet, which is kind of ironic if you think about it. But anyway, so let's dive into first Vettel and the fallout. Now, Ferrari said that Sebastian and the team didn't have the same short-term and long-term goals. Now, I thought that in and of itself is a little strange. Marco
He wanted to keep
Helmut-
going, and they didn't want him to.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, as you find out, that's exactly what it was. But anyway, Marco Helmut Marco sees no future in F1 for Sebastian. Ouch. David Coulthard says that signing Sebastian would be a huge or a big mistake for Mercedes. Thanks. Appreciate that. Total Wolff himself said that Sebastian would have marketing appeal to Mercedes, being German and all that, but they're thinking long term, right? So read George Russell.
So marketing appeal, just not skill appeal.
What?
Marketing appeal.
Not
Okay,
driving skill.
I mean, I think it brings a bit more to the table than just
Right.
marketing.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
He's a fairly decent driver.
He
have
doesn't.
talent.
Right.
Yeah.
He just doesn't sell schnitzel, right? He has other
Right.
jobs too that he's good at.
Right. Right. I think I just had an image of Sebastian doing, commercials. Hi, try this Leapfromilch. Okay, so moving on. Christian Horner says there's no way that team would want 2 alpha males at Red Bull. Reports now, this is where it gets a little sticky. So Ferrari's commentary was, pretty straightforward. Like to thank Sebastian, that whole thing, what you expect. That's exactly what you didn't get from Cyril Abiteboul. But Sebastian's comment was a little interesting if you parsed his words. Now we're reading reports in the press that suggest that Ferrari never even offered Sebastian a contract extension. They were talking about, maybe money is a difference, and Sebastian's wanting a longer term, and Ferrari only offered a 1-year deal. Now we're reading reports that, and this is from Mark Hughes, by the way, so I had to tip the race. Mark Hughes said that they never offered him a deal for 2021 because they had already signed a deal with Carlos Sainz in the winter, in the offseason.
That's crazy to think. Yeah.
That's pretty harsh.
Things
if
are
you think
bad.
about it. Yeah.
If true, and as you say, I would say I can't even believe that. But when you say Mark Hughes said it, the likelihood is it's more likely to be true than not, right?
You
So,
would think, yeah.
yeah, but it's just, you go back to things Ferrari said and Seb said in the past, and you're like, well, what was all that about then? You know, we're really close, we really wanted to be apart, you know, and everything, but evidently not. I don't know. There's no way of knowing exactly what the truth is, but it does seem strange that they would have gone down that avenue so early without seeing what Vettel really wanted to do. He may have said, hey, this is my last year, and you know, I want to go retire, and why wouldn't they have been happy to have Vettel still on the team, you know?
Well, it is interesting how, Sebastian, in my mind, I was thinking about this over the weekend, how you've got a guy who goes from champion to anti-hero, you know, or chump, if you will, depending on where you sit. I've been actually disappointed by the comments in social media this past week regarding Sebastian. The negativity, you know, look, you have your favorite drivers and you have your drivers you don't like, and fair enough. That's what it is to be a fan, and I'm totally for that. But I think the negativity was a little bit unfortunate. While every driver has their share of detractors, some of these comments were just nonsensical to me. Vettel, everybody's like, oh, don't let the door hit you in the, you know, fair enough, but everybody's like, oh, well, you know, that's fine, no big deal, nothing to see here. But, you know, Vettel leaving Formula One, in my mind, isn't quite the same as Nico Hulkenberg leaving Formula One or Stoffel Van Dorn. I'm sorry. I like both those guys a lot. But this is, as Paul said, as far as driving talent, he's a 4-time champion, and he's had a major impact on the sport, youngest champion of the whole thing. So I found that a little odd. First of all, the second thing that I was thinking, that based on Toto's comments, is that Mercedes is most likely will look to George Russell should they part with Bottas. But if it were me and I was Mercedes or Toto Wolff, I would take a serious look at Vettel, and I think Lewis Hamilton and Seb, and the 10 titles between them, would be the most successful driver lineup in the history of the sport. Although I suspect that some of the Mercedes headshed, you know, may not find this whole concept very appealing. And in fairness to fans, you know, Vettel's recent form has given them reason to offer unpleasant comments. But, you know, he crashed in Germany, and he banged wheels with Lewis, and, you know, he punted Leclerc in Brazil, and I get all that. I do. But I guess I think that may be ignoring all of the challenges that he was actually facing with the politics and the weight of what it means to drive for Ferrari. Remember, I was warning about Leclerc and going to Ferrari at a young age and handling the pressure and the politics. All I will say about this is that eventually Charles Leclerc's Vettel day, it will come at Ferrari. It will come. and he will face this as well.
How many people have left Ferrari without a bit of a tweak?
Well, you remember even Schumacher, Niki Lauda. Yeah.
You know, I mean, think how much success. Prost. Yeah, think how much success all those guys brought to them, and it's like when they're done with you, they're really done with you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and Leclerc will have his day. Right now, he's riding high, and he should. He's great. I love Charles Leclerc. He's awesome. Is Ferrari right to put their eggs in that basket? Sure. I think Charles got a lot of talent. I think he's going to do well. Throwing Sebastian the curb, that's weird. But all of the stuff that he was going through, let me put it this way. Today's Ferrari is not the Ferrari that Vettel joined. He's had 4 bosses and lots of management shakeups over the entire period he's been there. He didn't join this Ferrari. He joined that Ferrari. And Vettel wanted
an HR nightmare.
It has been it.
7 Ferraris ago, right.
It's exactly right, Grace. Vettel wanted to do what Schumacher did, but the team were in such a state of disarray that they could never have been singularly focused on building a winning Vettel/Ferrari domination machine like Schumacher had, because they were too busy firing team bosses and shuffling personnel around internally. Vettel, quite honestly, joined Ferrari at the wrong time. and it was a transitional time for Ferrari. And now that they got Binotto, they went through Arriva Bene, they got all these, and now they feel like they're building, and they've got Leclerc now, and he's their guy. They've picked up Carlos Sainz. They've dumped Vettel. In some sense, I'm not discounting the errors. Paul, you and I have talked about the errors that Sebastian's made. We've been pretty candid about that.
Yeah.
But this is kind of a crappy way to end the deal with Sebastian, and I feel kind of bad for him in that sense. And with everybody else talking about the negative comments just within the paddock, I think, how do you go from a champion to a chump like that? And to be honest with you, I don't think you might say, well, when he hit Lewis, banged wheels with Lewis, okay. Well, when he crashed at that German, okay, all right, whatever. It happens. I'm having a hard time understanding where all the haterades come from.
I mean, it happens, but it happened a lot more to Vettel than anybody else. I mean, and you're under a microscope when you go to Ferrari. You're under a microscope going to Ferrari as a German who's, vying to try and do what Michael Schumacher did. So there was a lot of pressure to do that. Whenever you go to a new team, you're looking at it from the outside. You don't know what they really are like till you get inside. And as you said, there was a lot of turmoil. I mean, that's what Schumacher had. He had the same guys every year.
Yep.
Success. And Ferrari, as you said, 4 team bosses. I mean, I don't know, everyone's got a new strategy, with when the new team boss comes in. So it's easy for the team to kind of get lost and not really have a focus. And you need that to go, be successful in Formula One, obviously.
Well, to that point, Paul, it bodes well for Charles then, right? Because now they've got kind of this stability.
Well, as long as Binotto stays with the team, I don't know if he will,
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he looks kind of like, where's Waldo? So, he could disappear. We may not find him in the next picture. I don't know. I don't know what their strategy is, for the future. They definitely need something that's set. I think Charles is a different beast for the team to bring on than Vettel, right?
Yes.
Expectations are big from Vettel to Ferrari and from Ferrari to Vettel. With Charles, he just, he's the wonder boy, and they'll do anything he wants. And he delivered, quite honestly. In the first year, he delivered. So Ferrari are going to, drop some salary for sure. Some not necessarily they need that, but I think Vettel made enough mistakes to warrant them questioning him being on the team anymore. I think. And it is a shame because he achieved a lot, and I would love to see him at Mercedes. I just don't think Mercedes are going to go that route because of what his compadres are doing right now in a Formula One car. With Verstappen, with Charles, with Albon, all those guys are doing really well when they jump in a big car, a big team, and they can make the measure of their teammates. So I don't see any reason why Mercedes would need Vettel unless it's for a marketing campaign. I think George Russell has shown himself enough that these guys are making it easy for Mercedes to bring George Russell in earlier than maybe they were thinking.
So it's a complicated situation. Grace, talk us through it.
Well, I think, piggybacking on what Paul said, I think narrative matters. Narrative matters big time, right? And so you're only as good as your last race. You're only as good as your last, incident. I think Vettel's narrative isn't very great right now. So I think it's easy for people to just jump onto that narrative. It happens to, people. It happens, Alonso's difficult to work with, that kind of stuff, right? That stuff lasts. And it's hard to get past that once that becomes your narrative in the media. He's more than happy being the bad guy, the Kevin Harvick, the I knocked over your sign because I should be first and you should be second and I run into people. You know what I mean? That's become Vettel's narrative, and that has a damaging effect on you, and that's true in any sport. So I think that's, optics is the other way of thinking that, right? So sometimes your narrative can overtake your actual talent or what you've done on the track. I think there's no way you're going to have Vettel and Lewis together. That's crazy. You thought Nico and Lewis together was a bad idea? No, that seems like a terrible. I don't see how they're going to manage that.
I think Nico and Lewis was worse than Vettel and Lewis.
I don't know.
If I was Toto, Yeah, I would ask myself, is there something? Am I confident that Vettel would deliver more points and race wins possibly than Bottas or Russell could do?
Yes.
And if he could, is it worth a punt for a year?
So there's like, here's like this big thing of everything that goes into a driver. You're talking about like this, which is markedly the most important part perhaps, but there's all this other stuff that Toto Wolff's also got to balance, right? That's the stuff I think that's going to be problematic. You think Lewis throwing a hat at Nico was the worst that could happen. I just think like I wouldn't want to have to manage those two individuals, their teams, their personalities, their people, their lifestyles, whatever, together, even if this part over here works out really well as a team on the track. They get me lots of points.
And maybe it wouldn't be worse than Rosberg, but Toto didn't have a choice. He already had Rosberg.
Right.
Yeah, right.
You know, and no one foresaw that whole deal going down the way it did. Everyone figured, Rosberg, Lewis is the alpha male and Rosberg will finish second. Well, Rosberg had a different idea.
Yeah, sure did.
And upset the apple cart. But at that point, Toto his hands were tied with their driver pairing. But now he can actually choose not to go down that route.
So let's talk about all the different permutations at this point. We have let's talk about Renault, Vettel, and Alonso options. So some reports have Fernando Alonso.
No more radio the rest of the race.
They have him already signing a pre-agreement with Renault, and many believe this is the right move. If that's true, Alonso's probably saying,
who thinks this is the right move? For who?
Well,
for Renault, maybe.
I said 3 years ago that Alonso, when things were getting a little dodgy for him leaving Ferrari, I said he should go to Renault, fire that team up, get behind it, rebuild it to, he won 2 titles with Renault.
10 years ago.
Right,
that was a very different Renault, right? Just like Ferrari. We were talking about Ferrari.
But he could have brought Flavor Flav back.
I don't think that's the only component that's missing. I'm just guessing. I mean,
I don't think Cyril can handle Alonso.
No.
I don't think he can either.
I just don't.
Alonso having crying in the corner.
Yeah. But most people are saying this, if it isn't a done deal, it's a foregone conclusion. I said he should have done it a long time ago before they hired Ricardo. Renault are a works team, but they don't supply in now. And going into 2020, they'll not be supplying any other teams with an engine. And while that engine got a lot better last year with reliability and pace, it will develop slower if they're not supplying multiple teams than the other engines. Renault might be interested in Alonso or Vettel, but would the salary for either be palatable for the struggling car maker, or would either driver take a pay cut for the chance to drive for Renault?
I read that Liberty Media is paying part of Alonso's salary.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, you could have some sort of other.
You could.
Right? Like that's how you get, Vodafone or whatever gives you the money.
Yeah, then Zach will be knocking on the door. Hey, I got Lando.
Yeah.
He's a marketing dream, but we just can't afford to re-sign him. How about it?
But I can't see Alonso taking a pay cut like that either. So there has to be.
I could see Alonso doing it more than Vettel.
Me too.
Alonso's out there. He's on a busman's holiday right now, right? I'm going to drive the Indy 500. I'm going to jump in a Jeep. I'm going to do this, right? I could see him doing it, but I'm not sure I see him doing it because he already drove a car that couldn't win a race, and he wasn't very happy about that, right?
No. And it had a Renault engine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say busman's leave?
Busman's holiday.
Busman's holiday. That's a new one. All right. I got it.
British thing.
I assume that, right? But I'm just saying, I'm
It's along with Monaco.
Silverstone. All right. Just trying to pick up some, useful phrases. You never know when I might become an international traveler again.
Yeah. Okay.
Just
Paul's
learning
going
things.
all Rory Breaker on us here. All right, so you have to also keep in mind the other driver at Renault and the chemistry of the team, because you do have Esteban Ocon there already. And, Mercedes found this home for him. They planted him over at Renault, and Alonso or Vettel would either of them be a good fit, or would Mercedes if Mercedes hires George Russell in place of Bottas, would Bottas be a good fit over at Renault?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I think we should put Alonso and Vettel at Renault. Problem solved.
There you go.
There you go. Move Ocon back over to Mercedes.
The World Championship team.
Right.
It would be Thunderdome. They're either both going to do well or they're both going to be dead. There's a body bag involved otherwise.
Yeah.
There's no in between on that one.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think the money is the big an issue as with Alonso as the competitiveness of the car.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I agree with that.
And rehirings, I've seen some suggestions to rehire Hulkenberg. I don't see that in the cards. No. I think Cyril, for whatever reason, he was kind of done with Nico. Whoever would go there, whether it was Alonso, I don't know that Seb would be interested, and I don't know that Cyril would be interested in Seb. But Seb did win 4 titles with a Renault, so there is that. Yeah. But either way, if you're Alonso or Sebastian, I said like 3 years ago, Alonso should have went there because it's a works team with manufacturer backing, and he could rebuild this team and bring it back towards the front. And I said that, but it didn't happen. And because of that, I'm left with being very critical of Cyril, which I've been for the last 2 seasons, because they're not. I said they got rid of Fred Vasseur, and they probably shouldn't have. But the point of it is that Ricciardo took a punt on the team, and he's a hell of a good driver. And we all see how that turned out. So after 2 years, he's done with that. He doesn't feel comfortable they're going in the right way. Whoever takes that role or that seat, whether it's Alonso, Vettel, or somebody else, they do run the risk of a Ricciardo repeat, if you will, if the team doesn't do something about Cyril. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's fun. Did you see when Ricciardo was first hired by Renault, and it's his first day at work video little movie thing?
I think I did. Yeah,
one of those hilarious things, and there's Ricciardo getting his desk, and where's his computer, and where's
oh yes.
I want to see the reverse when he's leaving.
With his
exit interview. So is there anyone particularly in the company that kind of spurred on Cyril? What?
Yeah,
we can't pronounce his name anyway either. But yeah, it'd be funny. Very short-lived.
I think that's what's holding that team back. I don't think
Alonso's into rebuilding. No. I don't get that sense, right? Like
Well, that's what Zach Brown said.
I mean, he's more, he's more like a Kimi Räikkönen than a rebuild. I think I see it in other sports, right? You see. You see somebody like LeBron James is like, I'm going to take this team from Cleveland and I'm going to make them into something great. I did this in Miami. We're going to do this. That is who LeBron James is. He will continue to do that. It's not everybody. Not everybody really wants to come into a company and pull them up and make everybody successful and spend that kind of time. Some are Kimi Räikkönen. They just want to show up and drive the car, and you figure out that shit. That's what you're being paid for. You're the team lead, not me. You do that job. So I don't think Alonso going to Renault, because I think you would have to be a rebuilder. You'd have to be interested in that. I think Alonso's time at McLaren shows he really was not interested in that.
Well, Zach said, Paul, he said he didn't think Alonso would be interested in rebuilding either, although he did say that if you're Renault, picking up Alonso is a no-brainer.
Well, I mean, if you're just looking at pure talent, what talent's available, right? So, yeah.
Would you, if you're Cyril, would you pick, and you had the option for Alonso or Vettel or maybe somebody else on the grid, who would you choose?
I'd choose Alonso.
Yeah.
I mean, even when, because, as we just talked about, Vettel had some issues where he made mistakes at the wrong moment. And it's never a good moment to make a mistake. But even when Alonso was struggling with that McLaren and trying to get some points out of it, he was still driving the wheels off that thing and driving like a world champion, I feel. So there's no reason for me to not believe that he wouldn't come back in and still have that same kind of level of talent,
Yeah, I'd make the same choice. I'd hire Alonso for sure.
I do too. I just think I'd want to have some real conversation, right? Because I do think there's all that other stuff is really important. And I think I
Yeah.
mean, right? We all work jobs, and so sometimes you hire people and you think they're going to be great for this job, and then they just like it doesn't work, right? And
Right.
so
Mhm.
you really want to make sure you can have the pieces in place, whatever that would be at a race team, to make sure that that part of it, you know,
Yeah.
Right.
works
And I
too.
don't know that Renault's in a big hurry to make this announcement. There's nothing pressing at this point.
Right. I mean, they you know, they got Ocon. I mean, the only thing's pressing is that they want to get the best driver before someone else gets the best driver, right?
Right, right. That would be
So-
pressing for sure.
So they've got Ocon. They really need
Hmm.
a bit of flair. They need a Leclerc or they need a Verstappen in that seat. Maybe Ocon can do that. I don't know.
Well, they had it with Dan.
But I don't think Bottas is going to
Right.
fit that bill.
No, I don't think Bottas is either. I think Alonso would. To be honest, you know, whether you like him or not, I think Vettel would to a point because of his
Yeah.
titles and what he's achieved in Formula
Yeah.
One.
I definitely take Alonso over Bottas.
For
I
sure.
mean,
I
you know,
would
right?
too.
Like, I think that would be for
Yeah.
sure. He'd be third on that list.
Yeah, I don't know. You never know. If they took Vettel, it may be a whole different world for Vettel where there's no pressure. He may
Right.
like
That's-
his racing again. You know,
Right.
I don't know.
That's
Right.
what Ricciardo went there for, right? Like it was
That's what
some of-
Kimi's doing.
right. It's the management personality change that he was really looking for. He really didn't like
Right.
life at Red Bull Racing. He was
Well,
really-
there's a part of me that would love to see something bizarre like that happen because he went to Ferrari to do just that, to rebuild and do what Schumacher did with Ferrari. And then Ferrari was in a complete state of disarray and didn't happen. And then they kick him out because he's the issue, right? It would be funny to see him go to Renault and something
win.
click, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden Renault get their crap together
That's what-
and start winning races and build around Vettel and Ocon. I think that would be
Right.
hilarious.
That's what everybody wants, right? That's like, you know, you break up with somebody and then you show up with somebody else
Yeah.
who's a better version of that person. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, look at this on my arm. That's right. It's
Yeah.
not you. Right. Like, of
Right.
course, that's what you'd want.
right.
Right. But unfortunately, I think Renault shot themselves in the foot by their chassis development. Really, well, you know, understandably,
Yeah.
they didn't know they wouldn't have to run this chassis for the next 2 years. They were basically,
Right.
you know, just hanging out for this year and putting a focus on the new chassis, which is now another year away.
Another year away.
And now, so if you're a new driver coming in, you know that they don't really have the goods right now, and for them to pull it out of the chassis they've already got may be harder than they've even had it before when they were actually trying to build a fast car
Right.
instead of wondering about the next fast car they would build.
So let's talk about Ferrari's new guy. So Ferrari has a new driver. Reports, as I mentioned, suggest that Sainz was already a done deal over the winter. He speaks fluent Italian. That always comes in darn handy. And is still young, but has quite a bit of experience for his age, given the amount of time he's been in Formula One. He was the one guy at Red Bull Racing that gave Max a run for his money. So we know he can drive. Paul and I, our jury was a little out on Carlos coming out of Renault. He didn't light it up at Renault like I thought he was going to. He had those last 4 or so races of the year previous in the fall where he was coming out gangbusters at Renault. And then you thought, great, and he's going into the next season, he's going to hit that. He never could repeat that sort of type of performance at Renault. So my jury is out. But then Paul and I and Grace talked about it, the performance he put in McLaren. We thought he did a great job over there. Ferrari may feel he's going to be a good wingman to Charles, but I suspect Carlos has a very strong desire to win. This may not be as harmonious as one might imagine, is my guess. Carlos may find himself ground up by the Ferrari political machine in the process because Charles is their number one, and the only way he gets a lifeline to Ferrari is by knocking Chuck's feet off the desk. And we say how well that went when Vettel just tried it last year. Doesn't go over well with Ferrari. So this is a very difficult situation for Carlos to be in. What he thinks he can achieve at Ferrari versus, hey, what he's getting paid, having the austere ride at Ferrari, all that brings, the commercial success. There's lots of upside, but long term, it's kind of interesting to me in what he hopes to achieve. As I said, if it were me, I would have went for Ricardo, but having said that, I completely understand how Carlos fits the Ferrari vibe, but it's a little bit unprecedented too. Grace and I have talked about this in the past, that Ferrari typically goes for proven championship winners. This is the youngest driver lineup at Ferrari in 50 years. That's quite a change.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think for sure, you know, Carlos, you know, if I can drive Ferrari, I'll drive Ferrari. It's a step up, right? It's
Yep,
it's a
for sure.
that. And I would tell them Ferrari whatever they wanted to hear to get me in that seat. Oh yeah, Charles. Oh yeah, I'll be great. Oh yeah, if you want me to follow him, sure. But once you're in that seat, I think we're going to see a new Carlos. Not a new Carlos, but they're going to see a different Carlos than maybe they're thinking and hoping for, because he is there to win a championship. Carlos Sainz Jr. is just like his dad, and he's there to be successful, and they're trying to figure out their ways of moving up the ladder to put him in that role. And I think his dad is a good influence on Junior, and I think that will actually help him with this whole political situation that is going to occur at Ferrari. And I think he's a very good, wise driver, and who's driven for many different manufacturers, and he can kind of guide his son in the best way he can, so he's not upsetting the apple cart, but he's still allowing him to show everybody what he's actually capable of, which I think is quite a lot. And I think he's going to be extremely close to Charles, and I think he's going to beat him on occasion. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't think he's just going to be an easy boy number 2 at all. So I'm actually excited to see how this thing erupts.
I think that could be good, right? I think you want somebody that's going to push Charles Leclerc, right? Like, so sometimes, you know, we all need to be, you know, pushed. You know, you're like in a meeting, you're like, oh my God, I can't do this, right? And then you do it, and then that's how you get better, or you gain more confidence, right? So I could see having somebody like Carlos Sainz would keep pushing Charles Leclerc to do well, as opposed to having just like a straight up number 2 that's not going to really challenge him. I'd really want somebody that's going to take it to him week on week to make him better. You just have to watch that it doesn't go sideways. But I think anybody that's even watched the buddy cop film that is, you know, Lando and Carlos Sainz playing Jenga together gets that sense about Carlos Sainz, right? Like, I think you'd be a fool to not think, he doesn't take to losing well. So, which Lando then of course exploits against him. But you know,
and I think Carlos is going to be interesting because he's kind of like Perez in the way that he can run so many different strategies that I think that's I was him, that's how I would go about beating Charles Leclerc, not in a side-by-side battle, you know, but, you know, developing strategies with your half of the garage to end up ahead of Charles where there can be no questions. And Carlos can do it. He can run hell of a long time on old tires. He did a lot of good last year, under the radar, so to speak. But in the end, no one could ignore, you know, how fast he was and what he can do with a car.
There were some of those performances he put in, Paul, were just a super long runs on tires that he managed them.
I mean, where did he, because he got that, did he get the podium at Brazil starting last?
Yeah, or way back, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was a topsy-turvy track, but that was just not just the only one that he was able to do that, come from nowhere and get some points out of the whole day.
Right. Yeah, it was a brilliant performance. I'm very intrigued to see how this will work. New driver lineup, super young. Carlos, you know, like I said, I totally understand why, if you had Dan and you had Carlos, you know, Dan had a little more friction between his teammates than we've seen from Carlos. Carlos probably a little more manageable, they're thinking. Speaks Italian, good-looking guy, just, you know, the whole thing. And team with Charles Leclerc, I'm sure they feel like this is a great driver's lineup. And to be honest with you, I think it probably is. It probably is a terrific lineup, and hopefully it'll bear fruit quickly, and hopefully the team can start to give Charles what they never could for Sebastian. So there's that. All right, let's talk about
support.
Yeah, I know. I just think he's getting short shrift. I'm sorry.
I mean, I see what you're saying, and I think the other thing too is that you're also thinking about Vettel across a span of his whole career, right? And so I think that if you haven't been watching, or people don't pay attention that long, right? Like, so, that's where I think that narrative thing comes in real hard, is if you really don't think about a driver across a 10-year span, but just like, oh, the last couple of years when they were doing some stuff, that's where that's going to come from. But across his whole career is very different. I think one last thing on Vettel, he reminds me a lot of Casey Stoner and how he sounded when he left. So it's all the more reason why I think that Vettel's out. He really has nothing great to say about what's going on.
Yeah. I don't see if Alonso takes Renault, Paul, I don't see Vettel.
No, I think the unfortunate thing is, I think Vettel still has life in him, and I think he still could turn it around and be successful. But there's nowhere, the way the structure of Formula One is right now, there's no other team that can give him that chance. Right? In the old days, if you left McLaren in the 70s and you went to here, you could still win in a Wolf. You could, but he doesn't have anywhere. There's no teams to go to that he can be competitive in, and he doesn't. I'm sure he doesn't want to be anywhere less than that.
No, I wouldn't think he would either. And it is kind of sad if you think about if Sebastian isn't on the grid next year, there will be no Germans on the grid, and that will be for the first time in a long time. Not too long ago, there were 7 Germans on the grid.
It's going to make it hard on my
What's Frentzen doing right now?
My international Formula One team a year from now, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is.
We get a few more Italians that are good. I think that's really the whole I've discovered.
Where's the Glockster when you need him?
What is Timo Glockter? I think he's
That's
DTM,
crazy.
but
He's racing esports.
Yeah.
DTM
like,
esports. Yeah.
Whatever, just like everybody else. DTM esports.
What's he racing?
He was racing in DTM esports.
Yes.
Your favorite. Yeah.
My favorite.
Right.
That has become my synonymous soundbite for anything Formula E or electric. Okay, we're going to talk about Grace's new guy over at McLaren.
That's right.
Oh, Grace, you got Daniel and Lando together, or what I'm now referring as Dando. It's like Brangelina, right? It's
Right.
Dando, the combination of
Lando.
Dan and Lando. And this should be a real hoot, folks. And if Lando was as giddy as a drunken man, wait until he gets a load of Dan's off-the-wall humor. This should be hilarity ensues. It should be madcap, knee-slapping fun over there at Zach's crazy house of wackiness.
It has officially become the opposite of Ron Dennis' house, right? Like this finally.
Oh, for sure.
Nice, Ron.
Yeah, for sure. But let me throw you a curveball.
All right.
Dan's 30-something.
Was he?
Yes. What if that Dan doesn't show up? What if he has a hell of a lot to prove and very little time to do it in? So Dan very well may bring a much more veteran vibe to the team, seize it by the neck and make it his. Lando may
Serious Dan.
the serious kick your ass Dan,
Honey badger.
who isn't there to yuck around with little Lando. He's there to win races, and he's going to have a Mercedes to do it. This is his best chance. If he doesn't do it now, he's not getting a Ferrari ride. Maybe he could get a Merc or something later on. I don't know. But I'm thinking maybe the serious Dan shows up. Sure, he's gregarious. He'll have fun along the way. But I think Dan's going to be there hunting for blood. I am a little worried about Dan because last year in the Renault, with all the changes that was going on at Renault, I was a little worried about his and clearly I should have been. Now he's left, but I'm also a little worried about him over at McLaren because McLaren are looking to find somewhere $275 million in a loan that they need to keep things going, and they're building in historic racing cars as collateral for those loans. And it just makes me ask, what happened to the deep pocket investors from the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Bahrain?
Well, they're selling fuel for 90 cents a gallon right now. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Well, it always seemed there was, hey, that's where their budgets come from, and we don't need a sponsor on the side of our car, But it seems to have, things have evolved there for sure. It seems like in the financial side, anyway. this team needs to prop itself up. Maybe that's why they brought Zach on board, because they're like,
Maybe.
okay, we can't just keep funneling money into it. Let's bring someone in that's actually capable of bringing in sponsors and developing a commercial program.
Right. Could be. What were you going to say, Grace?
I just think this is, speaking of Ron Dennis, this is his opportunity to get in, right? Like, and I shall buy the Paragon.
Yeah, he would just buy the bank that has the mortgage just because he needs to. Yeah, he wants to be a part of it again.
This is Grace, you're brilliant. This would be awesome if Ron was a ghost owner of some sort of investment group that came in and loaned McLaren. Ta-da, Ron! I'm back.
And I just show up with like dust off my historic cars that I own every now and again, right? Like, I'm just here to sit by this. Don't mind me, you know.
Yeah, this is the MP whatever, and this is my car. I was the team boss.
I own this, so how's it going?
That would be hilarious.
That's what I would do.
Oh, I love it.
Mika's allowed to drive it.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. It was rumored that Dan's deal was a $31 million 2-year deal. I'm curious, though, about the pay cut. Do you guys remember? McLaren was the very first team to furlough people and cut salaries, including Lando and Carlos's salary. So did Dan enter under that pay cut scheme or not?
Well, he's not there yet, so
yeah.
Maybe there isn't a pay cut scheme next year. That seems a lot of money for him, though. But
well, there may not be a pay cut scheme, but I still think they probably should have said, "All right, we'll sign you, but we're going to sign you, with a 20% pay cut for the first year. You got to suffer like everyone else is this year."
Yeah, they just cut Lando's. He won't even notice.
He's got all the milk he can drink.
He's getting so much money from his Twitch followers. He doesn't even need the money.
He doesn't need the money.
He's done with these people.
That's great.
This is now his hobby.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for the subscription, Ron.
Yeah. So anyway, everybody's taking a pay cut. They're chunking out $31 million on a 2-year deal. I'm just wondering if that's factored into, look, your market value is this, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. We'll see. Let's see. Finally, Silverstone and Austria both approved 2 races, but the British Grand Prix needs government approval, which is yet to come. They don't have that yet. However, the Walloon district in Belgium, they have approved, the local government there has approved the traditional August time for the Belgian Grand Prix. So that is hopefully in place. Singapore is currently in talks with Formula One. Germany was said to be possibly talking to Formula One. No official new calendar release. And I'm very curious as to what the deals are how these deals are being made with these promoters and track owners with no fans, no revenue, no ticket revenue. And I don't even think it's good enough, Paul, to say, yeah, we won't charge you. Okay, but that's not enough because I got still overhead costs.
They have to pay him.
Yeah,
they're gonna have to pay him.
You're just renting the track and you're coming in and playing. You may as well be, the Corvette Club for that matter. Right.
So if I want to go rent Sonoma, it's costing me $20,000.
That's right.
For a day or whatever the rate was.
Right. So they'll do. Obviously, the numbers will be radically different, this and that. But Formula One needs to be out there, and they've obviously looked at the books, and they're never going to make money not racing, and this is the only way they can go racing, so that they can start getting their TV revenue back, and they'll just hand the track owners a percentage of that and be done with it. And as I said, if you're just renting the track, it's probably not that expensive, quite honestly, because Formula One have their infrastructure and they're just going to pay for all their logistics and everything out of their own pocket.
Right.
And they're going to lower it, obviously, and do it at a minimum. But, Silverstone will be, for the first time, make a profit with a.
And I think
F1
Coda,
race.
wasn't that like 40 or 50 grand for a day?
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's not a lot of money, contextually speaking, for Formula One to come in and to Coda and say, we're going to run 2 races there. We want to lock out 2 weekends. It's $100,000 a weekend, $200,000.
Right.
It's a lot of breakfast waffles.
It sure is. It's
love those things.
So you mentioned that Germany, is that like all of Germany, a particular track in Germany, 7 racetracks in Germany? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hockenheim.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hockenheim. Yes.
Hungaroring's
That would be better, though. That would be great. If the
They're going to
Hungaroring.
move the Hungaroring to Germany
Holy
just for a
crap.
2-week span. Then they're going to take
Right.
it back.
Talk about breaking news. They're going to put it on one of those big things like when you move a house, right? The wide load truck.
Grace, check your phone. Did Flip send you anything?
Hungaroring.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure Germany's trying to do the deal at Sepang Circuit. Who knew?
Yes, I knew it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why is a Hungaroring? No, yeah,
Yes.
Hockenheim. I knew it was an H.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's
Yeah.
fine. That's good.
And
Thanks.
Hockenheim, it's a busy track, and they've
Yeah.
got stuff going on there. People rent the track all the time. So, Singapore is the most interesting one to me
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we're all you can go to these tracks and put on a race without spectators. You can't really go to Singapore and say no one show up.
Right.
So if they're committing to a Singapore Grand Prix, they're also committing to fans.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure anyone's ready to do that right now, are they?
Right. We will see. We will see. All right.
All right.
Let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
I'm behind on my mailbag. First up, Carlos Garza. Hey, Carlos. Went to high school with a
Carlos.
guy named Garza.
I did
Yeah.
not.
Well, you should have.
Should have gone to your high school, or
Probably both. You'd had a better education, Paul.
not many Garzas in British
You know, in this town of
secondary
Kent,
school. Yes, in the town of Kent.
the schools aren't so good, I hear.
No.
The Hamlet of London.
It's a little village, a little hamlet of Kent. That is. It's just one room schoolhouse over there, you know?
That's
And they're
right.
always sizing up your hands, you know, the rulers. Let's see. Carlos says, I am following the changes in the driver market as finally some news that are of interest with no racing going on. And I think in Mexico, so Carlos is in Mexico, he says there's a very good option for a sponsor in Mexico for Ferrari in 2021-22. Thought you would get a kick out of this. A restaurant chain, Carlos and Charlie's.
That is great.
That would be
They got to
awesome.
do it.
They got to do it.
Oh,
He
that's
said, I
great.
attached the logo. You can see it, which is really great, Carlos. I love that.
That is
as
good.
he said, now, finally, the question. F1 released this week the, quote, People's Choice Award for the most influential person in F1 history. All very notable options, though I would certainly was placing Bernie to win here, but popularity, I guess, is not his thing. What's your opinion on the choices provided by F1, and if you agree with the popular vote going to Schumacher? No, I don't. It should have went to Bernie Eccleston.
What were the choices?
I didn't see all the choices.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
see them.
I didn't either.
Flavor Flav? I don't know.
Oh, he was definitely big. So
No, I just, I would have said Bernie Eccleston.
people are never going to pick Bernie Eccleston over Michael Schumacher.
Well, Michael had a huge influence on Formula One. There's no doubt. Think of all the young drivers he influenced. You know, like I said, the grid had 7 Germans on it. No
Inspired
doubt
many
about it.
drivers to harpoon their championship rivals.
Oh, stop it, Paul. You need to listen to my new podcast.
I did listen to it.
That was good. That was good.
I'm
Nice
still bitter.
tie-in.
Yeah.
You're still bitter. You're like Damon over there. Hey, so if you're not aware, I started a new podcast called TPF Stories. It has a separate RSS feed, folks, so it will not show up in the RSS feed of this podcast that you're listening to now. So make sure that you go to the website and you will find the RSS feed and the post there at the website. And you can copy that RSS feed into your favorite podcast player, and it will pull it down. But I started a new podcast that Paul and Grace listen to, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for
It's
listening.
2 people. It's good.
Yeah.
When I was on a plane, there was nothing else for me to do.
Well, sure.
Kept him
Otherwise,
worried
I was
about
getting
never would've
angry.
listened.
I was getting angry listening to it. And then there's that guy not wearing the mask, and I'm just
then
getting more angry.
And the dry cough over there. Come on, people.
Now I don't get a drink. I don't even get peanuts.
The guy behind Paul's like. All right.
But
Great
nobody's
point.
gonna pick Bernie.
I would
I
have.
should, though. I would have.
They should, but I mean, nobody's gonna ever pick the commissioner over, nobody's gonna
Michael would be way down the list for me.
Yeah, I know, but that's not how people think. People are gonna pick LeBron. They're not gonna pick Adam Silver. That's just not. There's no. Nobody's gonna. They're always gonna pick a driver. They're not gonna pick.
Well,
Bernie.
the answer I think would have been different if they'd asked that question at the paddock or the press.
Of course, but you ask the
definitely
people.
yes.
The people are gonna pick Michael Schumacher. You're right.
I'm surprised they didn't pick Maldo.
That's strange. I wonder what's causing all the accidents.
I would have.
Or Bodie McBoatface.
Pastor McPastorface.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. Next up, Mike asks, so back to the engine thing. I am just questioning everything now. They say road relevance, and some V8 road cars are producing 700 to 800 brake horsepower with double turbo. Add KERS, and you have 1,000 horsepower and electrical innovation. Wouldn't this be the huge cost savings for existing/new teams, Ferrari, Merc, Renault, plus newcomer engines? Well, my comment to the first part of your question is absolutely. And producing 800 to 1,000 horsepower was being done in V8s even without KERS back in the day. So that was being achieved. With KERS, they certainly could achieve that. They were having to rev limit the V8s at the time, and this would be a lot less expensive than the current hybrids. So I am in total agreement with you on that. Paul, Grace?
He's talking about using actually a road engine and putting in a Formula One car, or just the general configuration? Because I mean, he's talking about an engine with turbos plus KERS. I mean, we did have, yeah, that would be great. I mean, but there's certain aspects.
You don't need double turbo on a V8 to generate that kind of horsepower.
No, but I mean, sure. I mean, but we've got electrical hybrid power now with turbos, so I don't see it that different, unless he's talking about literally converting road car engines
right,
into
gotcha.
And slotting them into a Formula One.
Oh,
car.
well, maybe that's what he's talking about.
That's what I feel like he's talking about.
Yeah, I may have missed that nuance.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways you can go about it, and I think there's a part of that they could never just put the road car engine in, take it out, jack the car up and stuff it in a Formula One car.
No, but you're in a series that they are doing this, though, Paul, in that sense, right?
Sure.
You've got Buick or the GM blocks. These engines are technically...
We have Aston Martins. We don't have Buicks.
Well, you do. Yeah, you have Aston Martin.
I mean, I'd love to have a Buick engine there. It'd be great, but I mean, GT racing and everything, a lot of it is based on the road car engines, and not much changes because street car engines make so much power nowadays. Mm-hmm. They don't even have to tune them up, and obviously the rules keep that at bay anyway. But you could, I think, bring in some kind of ruling where there's a baseline of parts from a street engine that you could then convert into a race engine, rather than the exotic built from scratch engines they have now. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that could be an option. It would be a cost savings, and you could pump that much horsepower out of them easily.
Yeah, I think you could.
But then are we, is everyone going to be up in a roar? That's not the DNA of Formula One,
Well, I wouldn't. But Paul, in your class, what are the normally aspirated engines generating horsepower wise?
Well, everything's limited. I mean, because of BOP and everything like that. So, you're, what are they going, like 500 or something horsepower?
So what do you think they're capable of if they want?
If you made it a race engine?
Yeah.
Oh, a lot more than that. Yeah. 200 horsepower, easy over that.
700-ish range.
Yeah, easy. And but these engines, they have a life to them. 10,000 K, stuff like that. Where race engines don't have that kind of life at all. So, I mean, for the most part, the engines are detuned from their street cousins because of balancing out the different makes and different engine configurations, etc., like that. So, it's just what they do elsewhere outside of those parameters that makes a difference.
And you like that Aston engine in your car?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it powerful?
Well, yeah. I mean, the rules are the rules, right? So that engine could be a lot more powerful, but it's a very nice piece of kit that doesn't go wrong. So that's what you want, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Second part, he says it seems like everyone is not wanting something like a race of champions, but I always found this so interesting to see drivers in the same machinery compete. Does no one like the idea of on a race weekend, all the F1 drivers say Porsche Cup cars for a weekend support race?
Love it. And it's been done.
It has been done.
Yeah.
Oh, they did it with the BMWs.
BMW right? Pro Car Series. They did it for 2 years. Yeah. They had permanent guys that were in the championship. And then I think it was the top 10 qualifiers,
Mm-hmm.
then got to race in the pro car race as well. So, so there was like musical chairs on the seats in some of the like guest drivers, you'd call them, right? So it was great. It was a great series. I mean, I loved watching it. I mean, I saw them race at Monaco and all over the place, but it was great to see them doing that. And they've done it in England. They've had one make series where they throw a bunch of drivers in there in all the same car, and it always ends up being an awesome race, right? The worst version of this though was something called Past Masters. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And it was in the US, and they did it with $1 million Jaguar XJ 220s, I think it was, right? And they did it at IRP, so which is an oval in Indianapolis with a very dinky little infield, and they destroyed those cars. And it was so sad. I mean, I don't know who was funding this thing, but it was on Thursday Night Thunder on ESPN, which was one of the greatest eras of racing on television. And they even had drag racers driving in it. And they had people like Johnny Rutherford, and they had Unzers and all these kind of people. And it just ended up being complete carnage in very, very expensive cars. So they need to reverse that, because these guys will just destroy whatever they're driving if they don't have to pay for the crash damage, right? So you need to go back to a kind of like a Long Beach Toyota celebrity race, right? Where they can crash the cars and, hey, you leave a pile of junk. It's not that big a deal. So, but I think it'd be a great idea, but everything's so strict now, and the contracts and all this kind of stuff. I just don't know if any of the current drivers could possibly be allowed to risk racing in a car on the same weekend that they're racing. I mean, how easy is it for any of these guys to go race even when they're not racing a Formula One weekend, right? It takes a bunch of lawyers and a bunch of time to get that figured out. So I love the idea. I just don't think the teams would ever allow their drivers to do it nowadays.
Paul, is that some Parc Fermé kit behind your left shoulder?
Yeah, right there, right?
Nice.
Yes, I'm still waiting for my Farm the Creep t-shirt. Did you change the material yet? I was waiting for you to change the material.
Oh, I got to go check and see.
I like that
I
soft
did,
brushed cotton t-shirt. Yeah. That's what I enjoy.
All right.
Go shirts for that way.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what else.
Before you go off of this, I think also too. I mean, the drivers have something to lose as well. Like, you have your street cred, right? Your narrative, right? So you'd have to want to go do this. You could come in last. Like, who wants to be the guy that
Lewis wouldn't have the advantage at that point, right?
Right. So, exactly. Right. So I think that there's also some of the drivers would be like, maybe not. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's what happens with the esports, right? Some of these guys, they practice a lot, and some guys don't. Oh, it's just a joke. And they got to the first esports race and they got smacked, and they either never come back again, or they sit there for the next 80 hours practicing, because all of them have egos, and none of them like to lose. So.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say that definitely the first virtual MotoGP race. Mark Marquez, right? It's kind of like sitting there, and he's like this, and then you see him as the race is going on, gets closer to this, and now he just is like this, right? So real quick, that like, whoa, we're just gonna have this like fun race around this track went away real quick.
Yeah.
It always does.
Yeah, exactly. So
let's see. In the interest of time, Mike, you had a second question. You were asking about all this downtime and me saying that sim racing wasn't my thing, and you were saying, hey, how many of the TPF listeners or folks have been into slot cars ever?
Me.
He said that he was looking at the digital slot car sets out there now. They've come a long way from the Strongbird Ferrari versus Jaguar set his dad and he played. Have you seen the brake, fuel, pit stop, race control options with digital sets? What does he say here?
Bryce, can you answer this question?
Is Maldonado still a worry for me, even in this environment?
That's strange. I wonder what's causing all the accidents.
That's so good.
Maldonado is always a worry in slot cars. I think that is always true.
So I remember when I was a very, very, very young boy.
I wasn't born yet, probably.
No, actually you were. But I would have been really, really young, like 3, 4. I remember my dad had like this taco box, and he was really into slot cars, and they weren't like the little ones. But they weren't quite like 1/18 scale, but they were the big slot cars. Do you remember those late
ones?
60s?
Yeah.
And the big ones. And I remember he had, and I wish I still had it, but you would open this tackle box and they had all these like spare rubber tires, different grip levels, different axles and gears and stuff on them. And they'd build these up. And it was a serious thing. And the body was like this, it was a Ford GT40.
Okay.
And it was awesome. And he had 2 cars. One was a GT40, which I absolutely love. And I was so young, I didn't really know what I was looking at, but I fell in love with that car. And so he was into it. But all these years, I guess it fell out of favor. But in the late 60s, it was kind of a cool thing anyway. I don't know, but you were into it, right, Paul?
Oh yeah, I mean, anything racing since I was 4 years old, and that was the closest thing I could start racing. First thing I could race was a slot car, right? So yeah, I had scale electrics, I had TCR, Total Control Racing, where you could actually push a little button and it could pass. And there's the Jam car, and then I had a thing called Aurora, they were really fast, had a bit more grip. I remember me and my brother, we used to put butter on the outside of the turns on the scale electrics, so when the cars would come out, they'd get really sideways and get back in again.
That's great.
Racing our little Ford Mark 1 Ford Escort, Mexico, whatever it was. Racing,
That's
so
awesome.
I still do have Aurora set actually at home. So
that's cool.
Yeah, and they've developed now you can run strategies, and you have to do a pit stop for a certain amount of time, lap counters and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty crazy stuff.
That's pretty fancy. Wow.
All right, love giveaways, some awards. The first award of the podcast is always Post of the Week. All right, first it goes to Photog CW. He says, I can see more of these doubleheader races filling out the 2020 season, but I don't believe the series or the teams will travel beyond Europe or the Persian Gulf states, and I wanted to go to the USGP this year too. I'm not so sure about that. I think Formula One is planning on doing Europe, the UK, going to APAC, and then the Americas, and catching Canada, U.S. Grand Prix in Mexico.
Yeah, they're planning on it. I think maybe he's speculating they may never actually get there. But I would say Coda's got a really good chance of coming off.
I would think Coda does. I don't know about Brazil.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
But I would think that Coda and maybe Mexico. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know much about what's around Mexico, and we don't know what world we're living at that point, right?
Right.
What did you say, Grace?
Ocean.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was really helpful.
Cerveza?
They got trees and stuff.
Ocean.
They got people, Paul. And they got Sergio.
You like my bass? You like it?
Yes.
And they got Mexican restaurants called Carlos and Charles.
That's the best.
Yes.
They need, if I owned a Carlos and Charles, I'd get some like of the cardboard cutout people and put them in the window or something, as if this is their restaurant.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think they've been hit pretty hard. So you're right. I mean, there's a long time from now. So the world could be a very different place, pandemic-wise. But as of right now, not looking great.
All right, next award is Grace's favorite award. It's the Lewis Hamilton Fashion Award.
Lewis Hamilton, there's no stopping him.
It's in there, Lewis.
Lewis Hamilton, there's no stopping him.
It's in there, Lewis.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
I thought that was a dog.
I don't have dogs. I have cats.
I know. I was like, you don't have dog? This is like the largest cat in the world.
What the heck?
Sorry.
She's
What
a
is
normal
that?
sized cat. Don't give her.
Okay,
Don't fat shame my cat, man.
Everything on you got the massive wine glass in the picture, and now
Giant cat.
big cat. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm actually like 5'1", you know.
It's this huge, massive cat.
That's right.
I like it. Let's see. So, Grace, you picked this one.
So this one again came from my crack research team. So hat tip Flip Medley for sending me this one. Anyway, so this is great because this is very much like we were talking about last week about Lewis trying to be relevant. And I've been studying French, and that's why I'm not doing this like Twitch thing, and I'm not in with the kids, right? But that's because I'm busy doing these other world things, right? And then this came out, and I'm like, oh boy, somewhere Lewis is not happy about this at all.
Yeah.
So
look at that.
now it's not just Tommy X Lewis. Now it's Armani X Leclerc. So he has his own fashion line with them. And I love that it says motorsports and music. Like the music is part of Charles Leclerc's thing too. I'm like, oh man.
Oh man.
So Lewis,
Uh-oh.
like this is
We need to write him a song.
Yeah. Charles Leclerc.
Oh boy.
Charles Leclerc.
He's like, wait a minute, Charles is doing my thing.
I won't do anything that screws up the team, even though Vettel ran into me. Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Good
So
fashion.
it's super catchy. See, can't you tell this is my day job is definitely writing
you're very good
songs
at it.
from Charles Leclerc.
It's fashion and music.
That's right. But so I thought that was a great find because that just was like super Lewis, and
It is a good find.
I'm sure he's
Treading
not enjoying
on
it.
his toes.
That's right.
Lewising Lewis.
That's right.
And that
Lewis is
ain't
going to
easy
bring
to
up
do.
again. I nearly left last year.
I know. Lewis is going to have to do something to up the game.
Big.
Just saying. All right. Well, the final award hasn't changed names yet because I haven't thought of a new name. It's still the Sean Bratches Bravado Award. And you know how you really, really like that, don't you? Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you want us to leave you alone?
Oh, yeah.
This is what he does after the show. After you and I leave the Zoom meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give him one of those.
Oh, Sean the Lounge Lizard.
Yep.
Boy, he like vaporized, didn't he?
He's gone, man.
was
Back
like-
to England.
Go on. I mean, I'm surprised Chase wasn't at his apartment packing his boxes for him. That was like
He like we were talking about Ricciardo with the box and the tie and the sad
Yeah.
plant, right? That's it.
no, I'm
You're out, man.
surprised. Yeah, it's crazy. So, okay, well, here it is. I'm handing it out to Paul's friend and mine, Mr. Zach Brown. I love it. He was talking about Alonso's interest in Renault, and he said, I spoke with him the other day and was kind of poking around, and I think he's undecided. If I was run Renault, that's who I'd put in the car. Big name, fast as anyone, won 2 championships with him, so he's got history. So from Renault's perspective, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer to put in. But whether Fernando wants to get back to 22 races with a car that doesn't look like it's capable of winning yet, I think given Fernando's stature, what would that get him to jump at a seat is if he thinks if he could be on the top of the podium. So given that they're on similar McLaren kind of journey back to the front, and I think they'll get there. They're a great team, great resources, great company who's been there and done that. I don't know if Fernando has the appetite to be on a 3-year journey versus getting in a car you can win with. Now, I love that because it's complimenting Renault, saying it's a no-brainer, but it's also laying out the reality of, but you don't want to do that, Fernando. You don't want to have to go through that grind, and you're not going to win. Because keep in mind, this team is McLaren's nearest competitor.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it.
I do also, this is relatively unrelated, but it does involve Zach Brown. Zach Brown also is now getting into the sim racing. So Todd, you really got to get on that.
He's
I
into it,
know.
like he's doing it.
Yeah,
Yes.
he does it.
Zach
He races. I'm sure that Lando got him into it, but he races with Lando and those guys.
Really? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, Zach
I-
drives.
Huh?
Zach drives. He's
Well, I know
raced.
he did. I know.
Yeah.
I'm
I
just
was
saying.
around.
Paul
I
was
was around.
Paul was
I was
much
4,
faster.
but
Yeah.
Paul was faster, so that's okay.
of course he was. Of course.
As I said, we were fellow instructors at a racing school. It's he drove.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why he's where he is. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
You're
I think he would be the first to admit that.
Yeah. I mean, how many drivers really make it to the pinnacle, right? But Zach was back then he was just the master of raising money, even if he wasn't the fastest guy on the track. And I think eventually he figured out, well, there's a lot more future in making money than there is me driving in 10th place. So maybe I'll do that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. So if you want to hear the new podcast, just go to the website. It's called TPF Stories, or you can search for it. But I don't know that iTunes has it reviewed yet and posted. But anyway, you can go to Podbean and search for it, because that's our podcast host. And they actually have a really good podcast app for your mobile device too. But you can go to our website, listen to it directly from the website if you want to, and check it out there. So that's fun.
I suggest a warm fire, you know, a little drink with some ice in it.
Right.
Sit back, you know, maybe a pipe if you choose.
Maybe.
And just
Bubble
listen.
pipe, a tobacco pipe, whatever.
Like a little cognac pipe or something? A bubble pipe?
Yeah.
Cognac?
That's the kind of vibe you're throwing out with this.
It is.
show.
It is. Lunacy.
Options.
Yeah.
Alcohol and bubble blowers. That's perfect. I like it. That's my world, man.
To each his own, man.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, stop by the website. Whatever you do, leave a comment. Just do it with decorum and civility. If you like this podcast, go over to iTunes and give us some love. Give us a good rating over there. Be sure to stop by the website. You can be like Paul. You can be like Grace. You can be wearing the Parc Fermé t-shirts.
I'm not wearing it. I
right
got it on my
now.
shoulder.
Well, okay, close enough.
All right.
Grace has it
I
on.
got Trans Am today. See?
TA, man.
There you go.
Look at that.
That's like a bitchin' Camaro, but with a cool logo.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Stroke race, baby.
That's it. Stroke race. So be sure to check that out. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreon members. I have to get Paul wrangled into doing another live session.
Oh, yeah.
So be looking for that, because I would like to do another live session with our Patreon. That was a heck of a lot of fun. So keep your Patreon feed, keep an eye on that, and I'll announce when we're going to do one of those. That should be fun. And until next week, when we come back to do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camper, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game